When it comes to Android, our hardware has outpaced some of the emulation development at this point, and there are not a lot of opportunities for us to push the hardware to the limits.
What we're kind of running into now is needing better software or better games for the hardware we have with this new Snapdragon 8 Elite.
Since the original iPhone released in 2007, followed by the original Android phone in 2008, followed by the first Windows Phone in 2010, they have each come a long way in terms of processing power. With the iPhone, AAA games are increasingly coming to the platform, with recent releases like Death Stranding, Assassin's Creed Mirage, Resident Evil Village, and much more. On the Android side, emulation has been getting closer in parity with PC, with more recent additions like Switch emulation, Wii U emulation, PC emulation, and even PS3 emulation, along with the ability to record 8K videos at up to 30 frames per second. On the Windows Phone side, it was one of the first smartphones to come with a desktop mode, the mode being called Continuum. It allowed for the user to access a limited desktop interface when the phone was docked, giving the user access to a full web browser and a small selection of basic optimized apps. While it was a cool feature, it would not be enough to save the Windows Phone from its demise in 2017. So this leaves a question. With the current duopoly in the smartphone market, what's a potential route we could go from here? Now, many people like to think of Windows on ARM as a recent development, thanks to Qualcomm and their shiny new Snapdragon X series. But in reality, Windows on ARM has a history deeper than you might expect. Believe it or not, this story doesn't start with Qualcomm. It actually kicks off all the way back in 2012 with Nvidia and the original Surface RT. Yeah, remember that thing? Microsoft's attempt to compete with the iPad and Android tablets?
I'm sorry, I don't have a USB port. Oh snap. You have a real keyboard too? This isn't going to end well for me, is it? Nope, definitely not.
It introduced Windows RT, a stripped-down version of Windows 8 optimized for 32-bit ARM chips. The catch? It only supported apps from the Microsoft Store, so basically, it had the versatility of a rock. Under the hood, it ran on Nvidia's Tegra 3, a chip that Android devices also used at the time. But despite Microsoft's efforts, Surface RT sales flopped harder than a fish out of water, mainly because Windows RT was too limited and the app selection was bleak. After limping along for a few years, Microsoft pulled the plug in 2015. Meanwhile, the x86-based Surface Pro series thrived and continued the Surface legacy. Fast forward to 2016, this is where Qualcomm enters the scene. They teamed up with Microsoft to shrink the gap between x86 Windows and ARM Windows. The game plan? Introduce 32-bit x86 emulation and expand software support. By 2017, Windows 10 on ARM was announced, allowing 32-bit desktop applications to run on Snapdragon-powered devices. This laid the foundation for future ARM-based Windows developments. 2018 saw the launch of multiple Windows on ARM devices running the Snapdragon 835. And here's the funny part, the chip was a straight-up smartphone SoC. Seriously, it had nearly identical specs to flagship Android phones from 2017. But hey, at least it had LTE and always connected branding. Later in 2018, more devices launched with the Snapdragon 850, which was basically an 845 with a slightly higher clock speed. The big win? It improved emulation performance because it supported ARM v8.1 instead of the ARM v8 instruction set, which had been holding things back. In 2019, Microsoft debuted the Surface Pro X, its first device with a custom-designed ARM processor, the SQ1, Unlike previous off-the-shelf chips like the Tegra 3 or Snapdragon 835, this was made specifically for Windows. But there was a huge problem. It couldn't emulate 64-bit x86 apps. And at a time when most developers were shifting to 64-bit applications, this was a major L. Then came 2021, and with it, Windows 11. This update continued ARM support and finally introduced 64-bit x86 emulation. It also cut off support for the Snapdragon 835, partially thanks to Windows 11's ARM v8.1 requirement. In 2023, Qualcomm announced the Snapdragon X series, a direct response to Apple's rise in the efficient laptop market with their M series chips. And in 2024, the Snapdragon X Plus and X Elite officially launched, signaling a shift towards competing not just in thin and light laptops, but also against higher wattage x86 laptop chips. Now that's all the official stuff, but let's talk about the fun part, modding. Remember that failed Surface RT from 2012? Yeah. People actually jailbroke it and got the ARM version of Windows 10 running on it.
I'm so used to using the keyboard and mouse. Oh, see, available on below for devices. It won't run on this device. Oh yeah, look at that. So it needs Windows 10 version 17763.0 or higher, which we don't have. But even if it did support this version, it looks like it doesn't support ARM32. It supports ARM64 though.
And then modders took it further. They also got the ARM version of Windows 10 running on Lumia phones. And then Windows 11.
This computer has two screens, one large one and one smaller one. And the smaller one also has a touch interface. And that's because the smaller screen is actually a Lumia phone with Windows 11 installed. And it's the center of this whole computer.
But they didn't stop there. They even got it running on Android devices just days after Windows 11 was announced.
Setting the rest down to 540p, let's say, with window mode, and then use the Windows magnifier to enlarge the window size so it looks like a full screen. What a genius idea, right? As expected, we got around 30 frames per second this time, and that is totally playable. Okay, forgot what I said. We can only get about 10 something frames per second when actually playing.
How? Because Windows ARM devices and Snapdragon powered Android phones share a lot of the same hardware and drivers. Enter the Renegade project, a modding effort that lets Android devices boot Windows by creating a UEFI environment that tricks the system into thinking it's running a Linux kernel. The result? Windows 10, 11, or even Linux on select Snapdragon-powered Android phones. Some Snapdragon 845 devices can even run older PC games, but let's be honest, it's hit or miss. And that brings us to the big question. What if the Windows Phone had a comeback? What could it look like? How would it fit into the current Windows on ARM environment? Right now, Windows on ARM laptops, including the fancy new Snapdragon X series, are struggling in sales. Why? Because it's still more practical for most people to buy an x86 laptop that works with everything out of the box and has full x86 optimization. But smartphones? That's a different story. Unlike the Snapdragon-powered Windows laptops, nearly all smartphone apps are fully optimized for ARM, so this means that a smartphone experience on a hypothetical Windows phone would not be as compromised. And then there's another dimension that could set the Windows Phone apart from other smartphones: the PC experience. With what started off in a much simpler iteration with some Windows phones in the form of Continuum, which had a very simple app selection and non-existent multitasking, could evolve to now possibly take advantage of the Windows on ARM environment, allowing you access to all sorts of desktop applications and games, potentially letting your phone to also be your sole computer. Imagine plugging your phone into a monitor or neck dock and using full-fledged desktop applications. No need for Chromebooks, or even a PC in many cases. iOS has reliability and support, Android has customization and variety, but a modern Windows phone, it could offer unmatched versatility with your phone doubling as a full-fledged PC. In an era where smartphones pack laptop-class chips and unmatched efficiency,
For example, with PS1 set to 9x internal resolution, we can get between 18 and 22 hours of battery life with the brightness set to 80%. That's crazy.
a Windows Phone comeback could not happen at a better time. Plus, it would be more of a computer than an iPad Pro is.